Hey y'all, this is Brown at Brown, and today I want to talk a little bit about something I learned regarding one of my favorite comic book characters from DC, a character by the name of Wild Dog. So, Wild Dog was a vigilante who was introduced in a 4-issue miniseries and created by writer Max Allan Collins and artist Terry Beattie. And so Wild Dog, when he was introduced, was a vigilante who was homegrown and had very much off-the-rack battle gear, consisting of, amongst other things, a shit ton of guns, a hockey mask, very much reminiscent of Jason Voorhees. I mean, this was the 80s after all. And a shirt that literally had a red dog on it, which was a school mascot. It was either high school or college, I don't remember which one. But later on in his career, he also had these stun gloves. Basically, if he was if he was wanting to knock someone out, as opposed to say straight up killing them, basically, he could reach out and grab you, and it's the equivalent of getting tasered. And so, along with the whole, off the rack battle gear, Wild Dog was, distinctive in the sense that he mostly stuck to the area of the Quad Cities, out in the Midwest, and fought crime out there, which you'd oftentimes would have terrorism, you'd have straight up ordinary criminals like robbers and thieves and what have you, even slashers, and then of course you got drug dealers as well, but it was basically an area where the brightly colored heroes of the DC universe seldom if ever ventured out to, and Wild Dog was the only one, was the only quote-unquote hero, actually a vigilante, who was going out of his way to try and fight crime, alongside the police, even though the police, were trying to go after him because he was a vigilante who, killed people, but, criminals, I mean. But, one of the other things about, his character was that he was oftentimes apolitical, in the sense that he went after you regardless of what side of the political spectrum you fell on. And in fact, in the, mini-series he was introduced in, the creative team made a point of having the terrorist organization that he went up against essentially have ideology and elements of both the far right and the far left, and just kind of mixed it all together. So basically showing that Wild Dog didn't play favorites. If you were guilty, he came after you. And so that's one of the things that I appreciated about the character. And, it was, kind of like a Punisher XP, but at the same time, there was enough originality to him to where it's like, there's similarities between Frank Castle and Wild Dog, but at the same time, there were enough differences to where you could tell the two apart. And aside from, the visual aspect of the characters, they're definitely, distinctive on a visual level, but at the same time, in terms of, their motivations or what have you, while there's similarities, there were enough differences to where, Wild Dog was definitely unique. But after the 4-issue miniseries, he had a starring role in the anthology series Action Comics Weekly, which had several good storylines, and then that were kind of grounded in reality, if you will. But then his final adventure for a time was a special, which, if I remember correctly, took place after Action Comics Weekly. And then after that, you'd hear a few mentions of him here and there, maybe a blink and you miss a cameo appearance, that kind of thing. Like, fast forward to Infinite Crisis, he's on like one page with a couple of other vigilante characters, raining down bullets on a couple of obscure DC villains, that kind of thing. But other than that, though, I don't think he really showed up much. I heard that he showed up in a series. Yeah, it was a Booster Gold from the Justice League. He had another series in the 2000s, and Wild Dog shows up in like one of those alternate reality storylines. And I don't know like if he had a really big role, but he did show up there. So that's something. But anyway, though, he did regain a measure of recognition and popularity, in the sense that on the TV show Arrow, a different version of Wild Dog was created and introduced, to modern audiences. And so the good news is, this version of the character initially, had, the costume that looked exactly like it did in the comic book, which I thought was really cool. And but they changed the character's backstory as well as his ethnicity. And so that was something that, on one hand, it was one of those things where it's like, I'm kind of 50-50 when it comes to race swapping or ethnicity swapping. I mean, and to be fair, from what I saw of the show at that point, I did like Arrow. I did like Wild Dog on Arrow. I liked that version. I thought he was pretty cool. But at the same time, there was a part of me that was kind of like, why couldn't they have just, stuck with, the way he was in the comics, that kind of thing. So, but at the same time, I did like that version for what it was. But unfortunately, though, they did change his appearance to make him more generic looking, I guess, like, all dark and ominous looking, as opposed to, say, visually distinctive, like, his original costume was. But anyway, though, that wasn't something I really had a problem with, because it's like Arrow and, the actual comics were two different things. So it's like an alternate continuity. I get it, no problem. But fast forward to, fairly recently, I think, I don't remember what year this was. No, this was recent, because there was a story that DC put out for like a mature readers line, and it was a Suicide Squad book. It was called Suicide Squad, Get Joker, I believe. And it was written by a guy named Brian Azzarello. And Brian Azzarello, in my opinion, is actually a pretty good writer. He's written some things that I've liked, but this is an instance where I think he really misfired. At least I haven't read the book, but in terms of what he's done with Wild Dog, I think he very much misfired, because what he did was, from what I've read, about the book, he had this version of Wild Dog, who may or may not be the original, except bearing in mind that this is a mature readers, as an adults only title. I'm gonna go with it's an alternate continuity, but complete with cursing and other explicit stuff. But anyway, though, this version of Wild Dog apparently masterminded the January 6th insurrection, the assault on the Capitol building. I'm sorry, the assault on the Capitol, in that, which was a very much real life fiasco. And so, basically, he had Wild Dog not only be the leader of this riot in this Suicide Squad book, but he also had a Wild Dog boasting about taking a shit on Nancy Pelosi's desk, which, I mean, on some level that is kind of funny, but at the same time, you're kind of like, really? At least, okay, let me put it this way. If you're a fan of Wild Dog, I mean, I understand Wild Dog is a relatively lesser known character, but if, like myself, you're a fan of the character, I was kind of like, seriously? I mean, the idea of anyone taking a crap on Nancy Pelosi's desk, I mean, it's sick, but kind of amusing depending on your sense of humor. But at the same time, to have Wild Dog be the one to do that, I'm just kind of like. And then, of course, they have. There were a couple of panels that they have on some websites where it's like you get a preview of the book, but when they're showcasing some of Wild Dog's panels, I mean, he's basically making a bunch of straw man far right extremist arguments, and of course it's the cliche that I've noticed where writers who fall on the left, especially if it's like far left or just left in general, anytime there's a character who, I guess you could say, is masculine and fond of firearms, they're going to make that character to be, a toxic male, especially if they're white, and, basically, make them to where, they're, the most, extreme, far right, individual, that you could come across, every, you know, far right cliche you could think of, you know, that kind of thing, which is something that does seem to happen a lot in comics as of late, which is one of the reasons why I'm, you know, as far as, you know, current comics, I'm just, you're really not a fan, because, you know, I remember it's like back in the day, I mean, yes, I mean, there were politics, you know, for both sides, but the writing was usually much better, you know, to where it's like, even if, say, a writer fell more on one side than the other, you know, if they were a good writer, they could at least, you know, say, find the humanity, you know, within, say, you know, a character who represented, say, an ideology they disagreed with. But it's like, okay, you know, the writer may not agree with, you know, this other character's ideology, but maybe, you know, they could make it to where it's like, okay, they could at least, you could at least understand why that character believed what they did, you know, that kind of thing, even if you didn't agree with them. But, you know, there was some intelligence behind that, and some food for thought from time to time, and sometimes they even have the other party make a legitimately good point. But here, though, nowadays, it's like, if you're anything, you know, remotely conservative, you're a toxic white male. If you know, if you're a character who uses firearms and you're a white male, you're toxic. Or it's just, it's lazy writing, okay? And the fact that, you know, a guy like Brian Azzarello, who is a talented writer, you know, is basically, you know, taking the easy way out and, you know, making, you know, a gun-toting character like Wild Dog into a far-right conservative who literally shit on Nancy Pelosi's desk. I mean, that was something that just really, you know, you lost me. I mean, I was excited initially when I found out that Wild Dog was going to be a part of the Suicide Squad, because I love the Suicide Squad. The original Suicide Squad series, though, as in the one written by John Ostrander in the late 80s and early 90s, is one of my absolute favorite comic book series. And so I even like some of the new 52 stuff. And I mean, and I loved the James Gunn, you know, Suicide Squad movie, and I even kind of liked the David Ayer one. I mean, there were things I liked about it, but the movie itself could have been way better. But the point is, I'm a fan of the Suicide Squad. So when I found out that Wild Dog, one of my favorite lesser-known characters from DC, was being made into one of their members, I was kind of like, okay, I want to look into this. But then, yeah, that's when I found out about what Brian Azzarello was doing with him. And so I'm not the only one who was pissed off by this. In fact, the original creators of Wild Dog were very pissed. And they actually, I mean, they had some good reasons to be pissed, you know, because, you know, I mean, along with, you know, them not liking what Brian Azzarello was doing with their character, I mean, you know, they you know, dislike the fact that that Brian Azzarello went out of his way, you know, to basically make, you know, Wild Dog, you know, straight up, you know, one, you know, political ideology, like, you know, like straight up, you know, far right conservative, you know, whereas when, you know, Max Allan Collins and Terry Beattie created him, I mean, he was apolitical, and like I said, he went after you regardless of what side of the political spectrum you fell on. If you were a terrorist or criminal, he went after you. And so, I mean, there was political food for thought from time to time, and especially considering that this was the 80s, but at the same time, you know, there was like a balance. And so, you know, not only that, but DC, you know, the company, you know, didn't even bother to, you know, talk with, you know, Collins and Beattie, or, you know, just give them a courtesy, just let them know that, you know, one, you know, we're using your character that you created, you know, back in the day, and two, we're doing this with, you know, your character. And so, I mean, you know, whether, you know, they would have been willing to change some stuff or not, you know, is beside the point. I mean, the fact that they didn't even bother, you know, telling the creative team, you know, hey, this is what we're going to be doing, you know, it's just, they felt very insulted by that. And, you know, and they were like, they don't know why Brian Azzarello, you know, decided to, you know, do what he did with the Wild Dog character, which, I mean, you know, no, I mean, while they have some bias in the sense that they're the ones who created the character, they also, you know, keep in touch with a lot of the people who were fans of the character from back in the day. And they remember that a lot of people were excited that there was finally a, you know, quote unquote hero. I mean, technically a vigilante, but for the purpose of comic books, a hero, you know, who was, you know, fighting crime in the Quad Cities, you know, which hadn't been done before in DC at the time. And so, to take all that goodwill and just, throw it out the door and, make, Wild Dog a cliche far-right character was something that really pissed the creative team off. But they also made another good point. They were pointing out that, Wild Dog, having been a new version of Wild Dog having been introduced on the TV show Arrow, is something that definitely boosted Wild Dog's fan base. And one of the things that was cool about it was that a lot of the people who liked Wild Dogs, this version of Wild Dog, consisted of a lot of Latinos, because this version of Wild Dog was Latino on the TV show Arrow. And so while they initially had some mixed reactions about it, in a sense that DC didn't bother telling them, and one of the creative team actually found out about that on Facebook, of all things. And it wasn't until after they found out on Facebook that DC's like, okay, we'll pay you, a fee, so that way we can use a character that you created. We didn't want to pay you the fee, but since you found out about it, here you go, that kind of thing. But at the same time, it's like, while they didn't appreciate that DC didn't bother telling them, and they had mixed feelings on the ethnicity swapping, they did appreciate that the fan base of Wild Dog was increased. And one of the things that they ended up liking was the fact that the Latino audience really embraced the character, and so. And there was like a lot of goodwill that was created there. And so I don't remember which of the creative team said this, but they were pointing out that, with Brian Azzarello, turning, Wild Dog into a, far-right extremist, who brags about shitting on Nancy Pelosi's desk, they basically, jettisoned any goodwill that the Arrow version of Wild Dog had generated, because here's the thing, you got fans of the Arrow version of Wild Dog who, theoretically speaking, might find out that Wild Dog's going to be in Suicide Squad, and so they go and so they go check it out, only to find out that nope, this isn't the Wild Dog that they've come to like. This is a Wild Dog who's every far-right cliche you could think of, and so any goodwill that the Arrow version generated for the character is kind of thrown out the window. And so I thought that was actually a very good point. And so but yeah, I just wanted to talk about that just a little bit, simply because one, Wild Dog is a lesser known character, but he is a good character, especially in the hands of his original creators. If you get a chance, look up the original Wild Dog 4-issue miniseries, and also check out his adventures in Action Comics Weekly if you can find the issues. And so because those were some really good crime drama stories, and he was a very unique character as far as vigilantes go, and I really like the character, but just when I found out what they were doing with him in this Suicide Squad story, and yes, I know it's a mature readers only book, so it's arguably an alternate continuity. It just, but at the same time though, it's just for as good of a writer as Brian Azzarello was or is, I just feel like he took the lazy way out and did something stupid with the character. He could have done something good, but there you go, white man with guns, suddenly he's like toxic or something, but anyway, yeah, that's just those are my thoughts on it. Let me know what y'all think, if you've actually read the story, or if you're a fan of Wild Dog like I am, what are your thoughts? But yeah, just give me a shout, let me know. And if you like what you see here, please feel free to like and subscribe. And y'all have a good day. Take care. Bye.